Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I encourage you to hit that like button to subscribe for more quality content and share with your friends. I also encourage you to check out my books on my author page. I'll put the link in the description, and I encourage you to check out the playlist tab for other videos. Today, I'm going to do a book review of a book that I just finished. It was by Haruki Murakami, and the book is called 1Q84. And I'm going to talk about this book and review it. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Now, I read this book because I wanted a challenge. I was quarantining myself, and so I knew I would have a little bit more time. So I wanted to challenge myself and read something massive, basically. And 1Q84 fit that bill perfectly, seeing as how the book itself is 1,200 pages long. And so I wanted to really dive into something deep. Now, the book is very deep. The book is also very long, and so therefore it is also complicated. And those elements are good. If I was going to speak directly, though, I still feel like even though this book was so long, it didn't reach the intensity and grandeur and beauty of Kafka on the Shore, which is also by Haruki Murakami. And actually, out of the two books, 1Q84 and Kafka on the Shore, I recommend Kafka on the Shore. But even with that said, this is a remarkable book. I think probably my most ultimate complaint is that the book was so long, and I wasn't sure exactly what it was developing. At some points, there were certain points where the book seemed to, where certain plot lines seemed to be kind of left ambiguous and were, I wouldn't necessarily say unrefined, but maybe underdeveloped. And I wasn't sure what the reason for that was, especially considering how long the book is. And this was not the only critique I was not the only person that had this critique, as I read some reviews and some reviewers and saw that they also agreed with me that there were points in this book where the plots didn't resolve. Now, Haruki Murakami is a wonderful writer, and I think that he is very good at characterization. I have always felt that his characters are very well-rounded and fleshed out. And so the three main characters, Ushikawa, who was the kind of villain, so to speak, who had a tragic end, as well as Ayumame and Tengo, these characters were very well developed. The book is split up into sections, and so each section focuses on one character's perspective. The book is written in third person, and almost a third person objective, or omniscient, although there are moments where it is focusing specifically on the character's perspective in third person. And I would say that the characters are very well developed. You get their perspective from all of these, from the book itself and the way that all of these sections are written out. And so yeah, I have to give him credit for that. So even if the plot itself might not have been my favorite, I would say that the characters were very well rounded. Now, the book itself, 1Q84, is a reference to 1984 by George Orwell, but I will admit, in kind of a puzzling way, I'm not really sure why the book was called 1Q84 and why that was related to 1984, but I'm going to do my best to make a speculation on the reason why. So, the world in 1Q84 is described as being corrupt in some ways, as including evil. And while the book is not necessarily totalitarian, and it doesn't go into totalitarianism, it does definitely go into some difficult themes of power structures, such as sagakaki, I believe is the word for the religion, and for a kind of compound, the religious compound of fundamentalists that is in this book. And I think that overall the theme of tyranny is much more subtle in this book, but it is still definitely there. The idea that there will always be forces that don't have your best interests at heart, I think is at the heart of this book, because I think that it captures that you never know who you can trust. There are a lot of, and so it may not exclusively be about the government necessarily, but it is about the way that institutions and forces can have these kinds of powers. So 1Q84 is a parallel world. So 1984 is when the book is taking place, and then Ayumame and other characters slowly shift into 1Q84, and so that is a very interesting idea. But it is less related to 1984 in that sense in terms of thinking about tyranny, and the book is more subtle. And it could even be described as being a puzzle in a variety of ways where you're not exactly sure what 1984 means, but you definitely understand it as a metaphor that permeates the book. Now, you might be wondering what I think of this book, and I do like it, and I'm glad that I read it. It was worth the month and a half roughly that I read it, and it was worth spending my time on. Again, it's not my favorite Murakami book, but I do find it to be very interesting. I do like the complexity and I like the themes. One of my favorite plot devices that was used through the book was the book within a book called Air Chrysalis, which is written in the book by a person named Fuka Eri, a 17-year-old, and she wrote the book Air Chrysalis, which Tengo rewrites. And the reason why I like this plot device is because I like metafictional elements in writing and in books, and this makes a lot of sense with thinking about metafiction as being a part of postmodernism. Haruki Murakami, of who is part of postmodernism to an extent. And so it's nice to see an interesting technique of having a book within a book, and the book within a book actually influencing what happens in the book is probably the best way that I could describe it. And I find that to be a very interesting technique to use. And so I do like the book because I like the complexity. I like that you're able to kind of figure out things on your own and see what's going on and come to your own conclusions. But I will also admit it's not my absolute most favorite long book. I feel like some authors who write long books have done it a little bit better. So I'm talking about Joyce, James Joyce, or Stephen King, who have written books that are very complicated and long. But I still think Haruki Murakami was writing this book with a lot in mind, and he definitely had a story that he wanted to tell, and I definitely really liked that. It was very exciting to read this book because I never knew what was going to happen, and I would say because the characterization was so good, you can imagine that the dialogue itself was very good, and I would say that that is very true. That is definitely what my sense was, what I took away from the book, that the characters and the scenes that were depicted, the conversations that happened between characters, very complicated characters, was very interesting, and I liked that component. Now, overall, as I said, I am glad that I read this book, but I also am ready to read other books, but that is not bad, obviously. I think this book set out, for the most part, and it succeeded in what it set out to do, which was write something, a kind of romp, so to speak, something that would draw you in and keep you captive for a while. And I totally recommend it. If I was going to give it a rating, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. And the reason is because I do think that it could have been more developed. I think that it didn't need to be as long as it was, even though I liked the description. And there is a reference to Proust throughout the book. And Proust, as you may know, wrote a 3,000-page book called In Search of Lost Time, and that book definitely delves into and deals with, I would describe unspecified scenes, where scenes kind of go on for a while, and it's more about the details rather than the macro components of a story you're telling. I haven't read Proust yet, unfortunately, but that is at least what I get out of it. And I would say that as a side note, the references to Western art and also Eastern art are very interesting in this book. And I think that it definitely makes the book enriched. But with that said, I leave it up to you to decide if you would like to read it, if you want to spend a month and a half or 2 months on a book that you may or may not like. But at the very least, I would say Haruki Murakami is a writer worth reading, and I would say he's worth checking out. I'm Phoenix, and thank you for watching this book review, and thank you for watching my video, and I'm very glad that you were able to come by. I will see you next time, and thank you for watching.